What's up, everybody? I hope that you're doing well while we are still quarantining because of what I like to call Big Rona. Now, listen, I got something pretty cool that I want to talk about today, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of things, I want to run a couple things by you real quick. You can hit me up on Facebook at Aundre D. Washington. You could also find me on Instagram, so go ahead and follow me if you want to at Aundre D. Washington. And please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And finally, you can really do your boy a favor by sharing this video. All right, let's get it. Today, I want to talk about the mischief of microaggression. Now, what is microaggression? Now, if I can put it in my own words, I would say that microaggression is a subtle or sublime or even a covert form of aggression. Sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's minor and sometimes it's major. Sometimes while we call it a microaggression, sometimes it can even be a macro aggression. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to microaggression, it ain't cool, and microaggression just ain't gonna fly with a lot of people. Now, here's the thing. I come from a very tribalistic culture. And what I mean by that is, tribalism is essentially when you are, or the group of people that you kick it with, are extremely loyal and dedicated to your social group or to your group of people. And anyone outside of that group, anyone outside of that squad or that clique is viewed with a different type of perception. When I think about growing up as an adolescent, and by the time I got to middle school, and especially when I landed in high school, listen, it was all about repping your hood and repping where you were from. I gotta say that there was this sense of pride when you would consider the neighborhood that you stayed in. Now, it was okay to be cool with folks who stayed outside of your neighborhood, but according to the G code, you had to be 10 toes down with the folks who stayed in your area. I would be a straight up liar if I said that even in my 30s that I don't still carry a sense of pride about where I grew up. The truth of the matter is, my mama still stay on that same street. The truth of the matter is, I have not forgotten a lot of my experiences that I had, in my neighborhood. And man, look, I still know how to throw it up. So with that type of tribalism being ingrained in who we are as a people, then there came the component of aggression. If somebody didn't like you, you knew it. If somebody didn't appreciate where you were from, you knew it. If you went to another neighborhood that was not your neighborhood, and if you didn't know nobody that was in the neighborhood that wasn't your neighborhood, trust me when I say that you were gonna be met with some type of hostility. The truth of the matter is, aggression was not micro. Aggression was overt and it was blatant. If somebody was beefing with you, you knew it. Here is the problem with microaggression. Microaggression is so subliminal. It puts you in a position to try to figure out where you stand with that person. Now, this may sound strange to some of you, but the truth of the matter is, from my perspective, I'd rather deal with just pure, blatant, and overt aggression. At least I know where we stand. At least I know how I need to move around you. But when you're being passive aggressive or you're displaying microaggression, now I'm left to try to figure out how I need to operate or how I need to move when I'm around you. 1 minute you're up, the next minute you're down. 1 minute you respect me, and the next minute you don't. Man, ain't nobody got time for all that. Now, if I have any of my Washingtonian friends watching this, I love you and I don't mean any disrespect, but let me be clear about something. There's a stark difference between how things were handled in Texas and how things, at least from my observation, at least from my experience, how things are handled here in Washington as it relates to our horizontal relationships with one another and our interactions with our fellow man. At least in Texas, if there was an issue, we was gonna get straight to the point and we were gonna be aggressive about it. Now, I probably didn't want to deal with it, but it is what it is. I knew where we would stand with one another. But one thing that I have observed since I've been living in the Evergreen state is that there is a spirit of passive aggressiveness here. There's a spirit of micro aggression. And I have had to pray and I have had to repent and I have had to continuously crucify my flesh. I have had to continuously ask the Lord thy God to make sure that the old Aundre, that the Aundre from 214 Texas, that the Aundre from Keystone Pope would remain dead and in the grave with no opportunity to be resurrected. Let me go ahead and just get into the story. So last year I went in to get my annual flu shot because, I don't want to be sick. So I walk into the clinic. There are about 4 check-in stations, if you will, and only one of them were open. The individual who was working the checkout station was working very diligently. There was probably about 2 people ahead of me, but it was taking some time because they have to gather some significant information and get you logged into the system, and no big deal. I'm just sitting there. I think I was texting on my phone or something like that. I'm chilling and I'm being patient. The healthcare worker is working real hard and she takes care of one individual. Now it's only one person ahead of me, and that person is actually interacting with the healthcare worker. And the lady, she looked at me very nicely in a very professional manner. She said, "Sir, we'll be with you shortly." It's probably going on about 20 minutes or so, and another healthcare worker walks in. She sits down at the other check-in station. So I hear her and I see her typing on the computer, assuming that she's getting herself situated. So I'm like, cool, that's a bet. I'm up next. Now it's going on about 5 minutes and she's still sitting there and she's doing her thing. So I'm kind of wondering do I need to say something? I don't want to overstep. So I just stood there and tried to be as patient as possible. Now let me get into the real nitty gritty, raw part of this conversation. Hear me and hear me well. She's white, I'm black. Now let me stop you right there, because you might be thinking or you might be saying, "Aundre, nope, stop. We don't want to hear that, bro. You cannot make this about race." Just hear me out for a second. I'm only standing about 3 or 4 feet away from this lady, so it's no way possible she didn't see me, even if she kept her head down the whole time. It's no way possible she didn't see me. I was the only black guy in the room, so therefore I was about as black is gonna get. I probably looked like a brown spot on a white wall. So, and I'm gonna be honest, I was sitting there fighting against and trying to dismiss at least the racial tension that I was feeling. But I was like, there's no way possible this lady can just overlook me like this. And then it happened. My feelings were confirmed when a white man walked into the clinic. He was about 10 or 12 feet away. The lady immediately looked up, looked to her right, acknowledged the man who came in and said, Sir, I can help you right here." Well, ain't this about a... I stood there for about another 5 minutes. I watched that lady with her stank face help that man. I'm being a little petty and I'm in my feelings about it. Whatever, it is what it is. This is my truth and I'm sticking to it. Then finally, another employee walked in, acknowledged me immediately on site, on the spot, and said, "Sir, I can help you. Come on over here." Now, you can call it what you want to call it, But from my perspective, it was a microaggression based on an ethnical difference. It is what it is. Oh, and let me not mention the time when I was working with a group of children, as that is a part of my vocation, and we were listening to some just good old-fashioned Christian hip-hop music, and I was accused by a Caucasian brother for playing a song that had the N-word in it. Why the N-word? Why would I even do that? Oh, I don't want to get into that. That's another topic for another video. But it's microaggression. I remember I was talking to a group of people, two of my white friends in particular, and I posed a question as it relates to microaggression. And I basically asked the question, like, do we address this enough? And how can we move forward in addressing this behavior called microaggression? I want you to be mindful of the fact that we were having this conversation in the context of race relations. However, my white friends told me, their black friend, that if I observe a microaggression, or if I observe something that is passive aggressive, then they charged me as the African American man who was on the receiving end of this subtle hostility to speak up in a very gracious and Christ-like manner, obviously, and bring it to the forefront and bring it to their attention. That's good. That's all fine. That's all dandy. But let's flip to the other side of this coin and let me present to you somewhat of a different perspective, from the perspective of an African American man. I may want to address a microaggression. I may want to address something that I observe to be very passive aggressive. But here's the thing. As a black man, unfortunately, because of what has happened to my people group historically, I really believe that something has happened to our DNA or our psyche to where there's this ingrained fear, or this ingrained concern, or this reluctancy that I have as a black man to address someone who is white and hold them accountable to their microaggression, or hold them accountable to anything that they may do that could possibly be perpetuating racism. Let me break it down a little bit more and try to get a little bit more practical. Back in the slavery days, at least according to some literature that I read, that a slave could say the wrong thing at the wrong time. A slave could have just the wrong tone of voice. A slave could look at the slave master in the eye a little bit too long, or look at them in the eye at all. A slave could look at another white person a little bit too long, or say the wrong thing. The most subtle thing, the most subtle behavior that by any means does not pose a threat to anybody, slaves were persecuted and met with hostility and were lynched and were beaten just in their general response to a question they were asked, or anything like that. So you wonder where this fear that some black people have comes from. Think about some of the recent tragedies that we have experienced in our country with the hostility between white men and African American men. Jogging down the street, minding your business, there's hostility against the black man. Raising your hands, there's hostility against the black man. Walking down the street with the hood on, there's hostility against the black man. In the house, eating a bowl of cereal, in your own apartment, someone barges in and murders you, there's hostility against the black man. Sitting in the house with a family member, playing video games, there's hostility against the black man. Now hear me and hear me well. I understand that, and I'm very sensitive to the fact that my situation pales in comparison to these other situations that I'm speaking of. And if you've been paying attention, you know what I'm talking about. But the underlying issue is this microaggression, or this hostility that exists between white people and black people. My bad, I know I went on a tangent. I'm sorry, please forgive me. I did, I was sitting on my soapbox. I'm sorry, please forgive me, just very passionate about the subject. By no means am I saying that microaggression only lives in the space of racism. I went left with that. My apologies, friends. But I gotta say that I have really been prayerfully trying to consider the best way to respond to this behavior. I would even go as far as to say that microaggression can be compared to the flu. It's a sickness. It is a behavior that is so pervasive, and it could be pervasive in all of us. But at the same time, I think what makes it so dangerous, while it is pervasive, it can take some time to be diagnosed or recognized as well. What is the flu shot for microaggression? How can we cure it? And how can we preserve our relationships when this thing begins to rear its ugly head? One who is consistent with microaggression is only showing symptoms of an underlying illness. And that illness could possibly be ill will. How do you fight that? One thought that I have, and I'm not saying I'm right about it, but hey, maybe we stop being so passive with one another when it comes to this issue. Clearly, passivity has been a hindrance for us in our history, especially in terms of race relations. I would even say that passivity can often be a silent approval of inappropriate behavior. If I can do my best to refrain from responding to microaggression or passive aggressiveness with the spirit of aggression, as I may be inclined to do in most cases, Lord forgive me, and I approach the situation with a spirit of truth and with a spirit of love and with a spirit of grace. In terms of conflict resolution, maybe even with the spirit of collaboration. I'm hoping that approach will penetrate your heart and you will begin to take on a spirit of listening and learning and a spirit of compromise. And then, just maybe, we could possibly resolve the issue at hand. Maybe if we just took the time to try our best to whatever degree we can to view life through the lens of the person who's on the receiving end of the microaggression or the passive aggressiveness. You know, now I'm removing this barrier of race and color. Now we're just talking about the practical issue of microaggression, passive aggressiveness, and our horizontal relationship with one another, and our duty and our responsibility to love one another as we love ourselves. Maybe, just maybe, I would like to submit for your consideration that if we try to step into the shoes of that other person to whatever degree we can, maybe if we work hard at developing a sense or a spirit of empathy where we try to gain some understanding about how our behavior makes the other person feel and what type of feelings or thoughts does our behavior evoke or provoke in that individual, which causes them to respond to our passive or microaggressions in the way that they do. Maybe if we are quick to hear and slow to speak, maybe we will develop the discipline of being slow to anger. If we slow down a bit and we put the interest of others above our own interests, which we are called to do anyway, if we operate from a place of grace, if we work hard at trying to preserve our relationships, if we have a goal in mind to see this issue through and to resolve this issue and to be reconciled to one another, whether that's a relationship with your friends, a relationship with your boss, a relationship with your wife or your husband or your kids. I think that coming from this, I'll just call it this place of grace, and considering the other individual, considering their humanity, considering their feelings and what they've gone through in life and how they have been impacted by society or their upbringing or their background, then maybe, just maybe by the grace of God, we can move forward more effectively in our relationships with one another. And maybe, just maybe, and I am speaking from a place of hope, it'll be easier for us to balance the tension of addressing these micro aggressions that we all experience to some degree. Man, I really hope that I said something that was insightful, informative. Most importantly, I hope that I said something that was encouraging to you. And please hear me. I am truly coming from a place of wanting to see us as a people really just treat each other better, and see our relationships be authentic and organic, and to see our relationships thrive and flourish. So, all right, y'all stay safe. Peace and love.